camera does not lie, but it does not always tell the truth. Sometimes, it merely captures a fragment of a reality that has already begun to fracture. We begin with the artifact of digital surveillance. It is a grainy, low-resolution video file, time-stamped October 8th, 2009. The location is a residential driveway in Eufaula, Oklahoma. The subject is the Jamison family: 44-year-old Bobby, 40-year-old Sherilynn, and their 6-year-old daughter, Madyson. To the casual observer, the footage depicts a mundane domestic chore. The family is packing their white Mazda pickup truck. They are preparing for a trip. But when analyzed through the lens of forensic psychology and behavioral patterning, the mundane dissolves into the uncanny. This is not a family excitedly preparing for a journey. This is a documentation of a fugue state. Watch the movement. The camera captures Bobby and Sherilynn making repeated trips between the house and the vehicle. They walk with a heavy, detached lethargy. They do not speak to one another. There is no visible communication, no shared glances, no coordination. They are two isolated planets orbiting the same dark gravity. They load items into the truck, only to remove them moments later. They drift back towards the house, empty-handed, then return to the truck with trivial objects. This cycle repeats for nearly an hour. It is a loop of inefficiency that suggests a severe cognitive short circuit. They are operating on a frequency that is inaccessible to the viewer. They stop. They stare at nothing. They resume moving. It is the visual definition of a trance. At one point, the footage captures them standing motionless near the vehicle, their body language slack, stripped of urgency. Yet, despite this lethargy, they are about to embark on a journey from which they will never return. This footage is the last verified sighting of the Jamison family as functioning members of society. It is the prologue to a disappearance that feels less like a crime and more like an erasure. The timeline moves forward. The scene shifts from the suburban driveway to the rugged, unforgiving topography of the Bois Mountains in Latimer County. This is a landscape of dense timber, steep inclines, and deep, shadowed ravines. It is an area known by locals for its isolation, a place where the geography itself seems to swallow sound. It is here, approximately 30 miles from their home, that the Jamison family drove their truck. They were allegedly looking to purchase a 40-acre plot of land. They were seeking a sanctuary, a place to build a shipping container home, a fortress against the world they believed was encroaching upon them. But they never met the landowner. They never viewed the property boundaries. Instead, they drove deep into the winding, unpaved roads of the mountain, further and further away from civilization, until the road simply ended. 8 days later, on October 16th, 2009, deer hunters traversing the remote area stumbled upon the anomaly. The white Mazda pickup truck was parked on a dirt trail, angled slightly as if abandoned mid-turn. It was not crashed. It was not hidden. It was simply placed there, a foreign object in the wilderness. The hunters approached the vehicle, sensing the wrongness of the scene. The silence of the forest was absolute, broken only by the wind moving through the pine and oak canopy. The truck was locked. There were no signs of a struggle. No shattered glass, no blood, no chaotic debris suggesting an ambush. But inside the cabin, there was life. Maisie, the family's small, malnourished dog, was still inside. She was barely alive, curled into the floorboard, surviving on rainwater that had leaked into the cab and her own fading reserves. The presence of the dog is a critical data point in this analysis. For a family described as devoted to their pet, leaving Maisie behind locked doors to starve suggests a sudden, catastrophic break from reality, or a forced extraction so immediate that basic empathy was overridden. The hunters alerted the authorities, and the Latimer County Sheriff's Office began their inventory of the vehicle. What they found deepened the mystery from a missing persons case into the realm of high strangeness. Inside the truck were the family's GPS system and their cell phones. In the modern era, these devices are our tethers to the world. Voluntarily severing them is an act of total withdrawal. Also found were their coats. This is a significant detail. The Oklahoma autumn can be mild, but the nights in the Sans Bois Mountains drop to freezing temperatures. To leave the vehicle without outerwear is to invite hypothermia. But the most baffling discovery was the brown briefcase. Tucked under the driver's seat, hidden but accessible, was $32,000 in cash. $32,000. The money was largely unorganized, stuffed into the bag. If this were a robbery, the motive was sitting right there, untouched. If this were a drug deal gone wrong, as some later theories would posit, the currency would have been the first thing to vanish. The cash remained, a silent testament to the fact that whatever happened to the Jamisons, it was not driven by simple greed. Also found in the truck was an 11-page letter written by Sherilynn to Bobby. It was a chaotic, hateful manifesto, cataloging grievances and paranoid accusations. It spoke of a marriage crumbling under the weight of unseen pressures. Yet the truck itself showed no signs of a domestic fight. The authorities expanded their perimeter. They brought in tracking dogs, drones, and grid search teams. They scoured the dense brush surrounding the truck. They found nothing. No footprints. No scent trails leading away from the vehicle. It was as if the earth had opened up at the doors of the Mazda, swallowed 3 human beings, and then sealed itself shut. The The weather, acting as an accomplice to the mystery, turned against the investigation. Heavy rains washed over the Sans Bois Mountains in the days following the discovery of the truck, erasing any subtle tracks or forensic evidence that might have lingered in the soil. The timeline was washed clean. We must now examine the final digital artifact recovered from the scene. A single photograph found on one of the cell phones. It is a picture of 6-year-old Madyson. She is standing on a rocky outcrop, presumably near where the truck was parked. The background is the blur of the forest. Her arms are crossed. Her expression is difficult to parse. To some, she looks merely annoyed, a child tired of a long car ride. To others, looking through the retrospective lens of the tragedy, she looks fearful. She is looking away from the camera, her gaze fixed on something or someone out of frame. The lighting in the photo suggests it was taken shortly before they vanished. It is the last known visual record of the child. It freezes her in time, standing on the edge of the oblivion that was about to consume her family. There is a profound dissonance in the image. A small child in a pink shirt, standing against the backdrop of an indifferent, ancient wilderness. As the days turned into weeks, the silence from the mountain grew louder. The search radius was massive, covering difficult terrain that challenged even seasoned outdoorsmen. The digital footprint of the family had ceased to exist. Bank accounts went untouched. Phones remained silent. The $32,000 sat in an evidence locker, a useless pile of paper that could not buy answers. The narrative that began to emerge from interviews with friends and family painted a picture of a household under siege, not by physical intruders, but by psychological and perhaps spiritual ones. In the weeks leading up to the trip, the Jamisons had reported seeing spirits. They spoke of a black roof on their home that acted as a portal for negative entities. Sherilynn believed she was a witch. Bobby had asked his pastor for bullets designed to kill ghosts. They were writing cryptic messages on the walls of their container home. This context transforms the scene on the mountain. When they drove up that road, were they looking for land? Or were they running from something they carried with them? The trance-like loading of the truck, the erratic driving, the abandonment of their wealth and their dog. It all points to a collective psychosis, a shared delusion that reached its terminal velocity on that lonely dirt road. But psychosis does not hide bodies. Psychosis does not explain how 3 people can walk away from a vehicle in rugged terrain and leave 0 trace for 4 years. It does not explain how they could travel miles without coats, in freezing weather, without succumbing immediately near the road. The incident at the truck is a locked room mystery where the room is a forest. The variables do not add up. If they were murdered, where is the weapon? Where is the struggle If they walked away, why did they leave the money? If they were lost, why did the dogs find no scent? The sun set on the Sans Bois Mountains on October 8th, 2009, covering the white Mazda in darkness. Inside, a small dog shivered. Outside, 3 people stepped into the void. The mechanism of their departure remains obscured, hidden behind a veil of static and silence. What remains is the tableau, the truck, the money, the dog, the photo. These are the puzzle pieces of a picture that no one wants to see completed. The incident was not a singular event, but a cascade of failures, mental, structural, and environmental, that funneled the Jamison family into a liminal space from which there was no return. This was the day the signal was lost. The noise of their chaotic lives was suddenly and violently cut to zero. And in that silence, the true mystery began to fester. To understand the disappearance of the Jamison family, we must first understand the stage upon which this tragedy played out. It is not enough to look at the truck or the items left behind. We must look at the soil, the history, and the specific frequency of paranoia that permeates the Sans Bois Mountains. This is part 2, the context. Geography is often the silent accomplice in unsolved mysteries. The Sans Bois Mountains, located in southeastern Oklahoma, are not the towering, snow-capped peaks of the Rockies, nor are they the rolling, gentle hills of the Appalachians. The name itself, French for without wood, is a misnomer today, as the area is densely thicketed, rugged, and notoriously difficult to navigate. It is a landscape of shale, sandstone, and scrub oak, a topographical labyrinth that has historically served as a sanctuary for those who do not wish to be found. In the late 19th century, this region was the hideout for outlaws like Belle Starr and the James Younger Gang. The terrain naturally resists surveillance. It swallows sound and disrupts sightlines. When the Jamison family drove their truck into this region in October of 2009, they were entering a space that has historically been hostile to outsiders. It is a liminal space, situated on the edge of civilization, where the rules of the paved world begin to fray. To the digital archaeologist, the date is just as significant as the location. 2009. This was a specific moment in the American timeline. The country was reeling from the housing market crash and the subsequent Great Recession. Economic anxiety was a hum that vibrated through every household. The Jamisons were not immune to this. In fact, they were arguably a product of this era's specific pressures. Bobby Jamison and Sherilynn Jamison were looking to buy a 40-acre plot of land. To the casual observer, this looks like the American dream. But in the context of their lives, and the context of 2009, it looks more like a retreat, a withdrawal. They were seeking to remove themselves from the grid. This desire for isolation is a recurring theme in cases of high strangeness. The instinct to fortify, to pull up the drawbridge, often precedes a catastrophic event. We must also analyze the socioeconomic texture of Red Oak and the surrounding Latimer County. This is an area that has suffered from industrial decline. When legitimate industry fades, shadow economies often take root. In this region, that shadow economy is often linked to the production and distribution of methamphetamine. I mention this not to accuse the Jamison family of involvement, but to paint the landscape they entered. The mountains are not just empty nature, they are territory. In 2009, driving a clean, late-model truck into the backwoods of Latimer County, carrying a large sum of cash, was an act of immense risk. It signaled intent. Whether that intent was a drug transaction or an innocent land purchase, the optics remain the same to a local observer. You are a target or you are a threat. Let us look at the financial anomaly that anchors this case. $32,000 in cash. This brick of currency was found tucked under the driver's seat. In the digital age, carrying this amount of physical currency is an anomaly. It suggests a transaction that requires no paper trail. It suggests a distrust of banking institutions, or perhaps a preparation for a scenario where credit cards no longer work. This brings us to the psychological context of the family. To ignore the mental state of Bobby and Sherilynn is to ignore the engine of this mystery. But we must be careful not to dismiss them simply as unstable. We must look at the specific flavor of their distress. Sherilynn suffered from bipolar disorder. Bobby had been injured in a car accident years prior and suffered from chronic back pain. This combination creates a household dynamic fueled by pain management and mood fluctuation. But beyond the clinical diagnoses, there was a spiritual dimension to their anxiety. The family believed they were engaged in spiritual warfare. This is a term often used in evangelical circles, but for the Jamisons, it had become literal. They believed their home in Eufaula was haunted. They believed in the presence of dark entities. Sherilynn had allegedly researched the history of witches in the area. She had spray-painted messages on a shipping container in their driveway, claiming that witches did not like it there. This is where the case enters the realm of the uncanny. We have a shared delusion, or perhaps a shared reality, occurring between husband and wife. This is known as folie à deux, or madness of two. It is a psychological phenomenon where delusion is transmitted from one individual to another. In the isolation of their home, surrounded by the physical pain of Bobby's injury and the chemical imbalances of Sherilynn's condition, they constructed a narrative where they were under siege. They were not just running toward a new plot of land. They were running away from a house they believed was possessed. This context recontextualizes the $32,000. Was it for land? Or was it a survival fund? If you believe you are fighting demons, or that society is collapsing, or that your neighbors are witches, cash becomes the only currency that matters. We must also examine the technological artifacts left behind. The primary piece of evidence is the surveillance footage from their home security system. This video, recorded on the day they left, is an artifact of pure dread. The technology of 2009 consumer security cameras was limited. The resolution is low, the frame rate is choppy, and the compression artifacts create a ghostly, smearing effect. In the footage, we see Bobby and Sherilynn moving back and forth between the house and the truck. They are loading items, but their movements are devoid of urgency and yet strangely repetitive. They make multiple trips to the vehicle, sometimes carrying nothing at all. They stop. They stare into the distance. They do not speak to one another. The silence of the footage amplifies the strangeness. It is like watching a pantomime of departure. They look trance-like. Digital forensic analysts have spent years scrutinizing this footage. They look for shadows, for third parties, for anything that explains their behavior. But the horror lies in the nothingness. They seem to be operating on a frequency that the camera cannot capture. They are responding to stimuli that are not there. This brings us back to the geography. Panola Mountain, the location where their truck was found, is crucial. The truck was not just parked. It was abandoned in the middle of a dirt track, locked, with their dog, Macy, inside. The GPS data recovered from the truck provides a digital breadcrumb trail of their final movements. This is a key piece of modern archaeology. We can reconstruct their path. The GPS shows them driving up the mountain, stopping, and then maneuvering in a way that suggests confusion or hesitation. They did not drive straight to a destination. They wandered. The spot where the truck stopped is significant. It is past the point where a casual driver would turn around. The road conditions deteriorate rapidly. To drive that far up the mountain requires determination. We must also address the cult theory that surrounds this case. In the months leading up to the disappearance, Sherilynn had become increasingly paranoid. She reportedly told a friend that she was on a hit list. The family pastor stated that Bobby had asked for special bullets to fight the spirits. In the cultural backdrop of rural Oklahoma, the line between fundamentalist religion, folklore, and mental illness can sometimes blur. The area is part of the Bible Belt, where belief in literal demons is not uncommon. However, the Jamisons had taken this belief to an extreme. They had isolated themselves from their support systems. They had pulled Madyson their 6-year-old daughter out of school to homeschool her. Madyson is the tragic center of this narrative. She is the innocent caught in the gravity well of her parents' unraveling reality. Photos found on a camera in the truck show Madyson in the final days. In one image, often cited by internet sleuths, she stands on the mountain, arms crossed, looking away from the camera. The lighting is harsh. Her expression is unreadable. Some claim she looks distressed. Others say she looks like a bored child. But the most chilling piece of context comes from a letter found in the truck. It was essentially a hate letter from Sherilynn to Bobby. It detailed her resentment, her anger, and her despair. It was not a suicide note, but it was a document of a marriage in total collapse. This letter challenges the idea of an external attacker. It forces us to look inside the truck, inside the family unit. Was the threat sitting in the passenger seat? However, the physical evidence complicates the murder-suicide theory. If one parent killed the other, why abandon the truck and walk miles into the woods to die together, face down, side by side? The forensics of the remains, discovered 4 years later, were too degraded to determine a cause of death. This lack of biological data forces us to rely entirely on the contextual data. We are left with a constellation of disparate facts: the history of the Sands Bois Mountains as a criminal hideout, the economic desperation of 2009, the $32,000 in cash, the spiritual warfare, the methamphetamine landscape, the trance-like surveillance footage. When you overlay these transparencies, a picture begins to form, but it is out of focus. It suggests a perfect storm. Consider the white supremacist angle. A combat manual was found in the truck. There were rumors that Bobby's father had connections to the Mexican mafia, or that Bobby himself was in conflict with his father over money. This adds a layer of familial vendetta to the mix. Was the paranoia justified? Was the hit list real? In the world of open source intelligence and digital sleuthing, we often look for the smoking gun. But in the Jamison case, we have too many guns. We have mental illness. We have drug cartels. We have wandering criminals. We have exposure to the elements. The context of this case is one of heavy saturation. The environment was saturated with danger. The family's minds were saturated with fear. The truck was saturated with evidence that pointed in 5 different directions. The Jamisons drove into a physical dead zone where cell phones do not ring. They also drove into a psychological dead zone. As we move forward in this analysis, we must keep this atmosphere in mind. We are not just looking for a killer. We are looking at a disintegration, a slow motion collapse of a family unit that culminated on a lonely dirt road in the middle of nowhere. The mountains did not kill them. The mountains simply provided the venue. The true mechanism of their demise was set in motion long before they drove past the tree line. In the next section, we will walk through the timeline, minute by minute. We will track the GPS pings and the final phone calls. We will attempt to synchronize the digital footprint with the physical reality. But to do that, remember the context. A desperate family, a bag of cash, a haunted house left behind, and a mountain that keeps its secrets. Part 3. The investigation. The investigation into the death of the Jamison family is a study in frustration. It is a case defined not by what was found, but by what was erased. When the skeletal remains of Bobby, Sherilynn, and Madyson were discovered in November of 2013, 4 years after their truck was abandoned, the hope for forensic clarity evaporated. The mountain had done its work. The seasons, the scavengers, and the relentless passage of time had scrubbed the scene clean of the biological storytelling required to close a case. The report from the medical examiner is less a conclusion and more an admission of defeat. The cause of death was listed as inconclusive. There was no soft tissue remaining to test for toxins. There were no bullet holes in the skulls to suggest execution. There was no obvious blunt force trauma to the major bones. We are left with 3 skeletons found lying side by side, face down in the dirt, 3 miles from their vehicle. The only tangible evidence of violence was a small hole in the back of Bobby Jamison's skull. But even this was ambiguous. It could have been a bullet wound, or it could have been post-mortem damage caused by animal activity or falling debris. Without the context of flesh and blood, the bones refused to speak. This forensic impasse forced investigators and digital onlookers alike to work backward. If the bodies could not tell us how they died, the investigation had to determine why they were there in the first place and what forces drove them up that mountain. This is where the case splinters into a dozen different theories, each plausible, yet each possessing a fatal flaw that prevents it from being the definitive answer. The primary theory, initially pursued by law enforcement, was a murder-suicide. The mental state of both parents was undeniably fracturing. Police reports detail a household under siege by its own paranoia. Bobby and Sherilynn had both reported seeing spirits on their roof. They believed their house was infested with demons. Sherilynn had allegedly researched whether special bullets could kill witches. In this narrative, the family drove into the mountains to escape a spiritual threat, only to succumb to their own psychological break. Perhaps one parent killed the others to save them, then took their own life. However, the physical evidence at the scene complicates this simple, tragic narrative. If this was a murder-suicide involving a firearm, where was the gun? No weapon was found near the bodies. While it is possible a weapon was carried away by a scavenger or buried under years of leaf litter, it is statistically unlikely. If it was a murder-suicide involving pills or poison, we return to the problem of the missing soft tissue. Furthermore, the positioning of the bodies, found face down and side by side, suggests a simultaneous event, or perhaps an execution, rather than the chaotic tableau usually found in murder-suicides. Then there is the theory of the drug deal gone wrong. Southeastern Oklahoma is a region known for its harsh terrain and isolation, conditions that unfortunately make it a haven for methamphetamine production. The Jamison family was known to be struggling financially, yet they were carrying $32,000 in cash in a bag under the driver's seat. In the lexicon of criminal investigation, $32,000 in cash usually signifies a transaction. Was this money for drugs? Was it a buy-in for a larger operation? The digital archaeology of their lives offers conflicting data here. There is no hard evidence in their phone records or emails linking them to a cartel or a major distribution network. Bobby had a history of back pain and had been involved in a lawsuit regarding a car accident, but they were not known drug traffickers. Moreover, if this was a robbery or a drug deal turned violent, why was the money left behind? A criminal element sophisticated enough to march a family 3 miles into the woods and execute them without leaving a trace is unlikely to leave a small fortune sitting in an unlocked truck. The cash remained untouched, a silent monument to the fact that whatever happened on that mountain, it was likely not about greed. We must also consider the envelope found in the truck. It contained a vehement, chaotic letter, presumably written by Sherilynn to Bobby. It was a hate letter, listing grievances and naming death. It detailed a marriage collapsing under the weight of mental illness and stress. This piece of paper anchors the theory that the danger came from within the truck, not from the woods. It paints a picture of a pressure cooker environment. Yet they were also looking to buy land. They were looking toward a future. The duality of their behavior, planning for a homestead while simultaneously descending into psychosis, is what makes the profile so difficult to construct. The investigation also touched upon the family's external conflicts. The Jamisons had been involved in a bitter dispute with Bobby's father, Bob Dean Jamison. There were allegations of threats, protective orders, and deep familial resentment. Bobby had allegedly claimed his father was part of the mafia or a gang, though these claims were often dismissed as part of Bobby's deteriorating mental state. However, investigators did find a brown briefcase in the truck, which contained documents, phones, and oddly, a list of names. Some sources suggest this list was related to white supremacist organizations or dangerous individuals, though the police have never officially confirmed the contents or significance of this list. It remains one of the many loose threads that internet sleuths pull at, trying to weave a conspiracy where there may only be coincidence. This brings us to the digital footprint of the case, the realm where modern folklore is constructed. The security footage from the Jamison home, recorded as they packed the truck, is perhaps the most haunting piece of digital evidence in existence. It is silent, grainy, and deeply unsettling. We observe Bobby and Sherilynn moving back and forth between the house and the truck. They move with a strange, lethargic rhythm. They do not speak to one another. They stop, stare into the middle distance, and then resume moving. They load items only to unload them. Internet forums and video analysis channels have dissected this footage frame by frame. Observers point to their body language as evidence of a trance state, fueling theories of shared psychosis or drug-induced delirium. Others claim to see shadows or figures in the periphery, feeding the paranormal angle. But from a clinical standpoint, what we are likely seeing is the heavy fatigue of severe depression and anxiety, perhaps exacerbated by prescription medication. It is a portrait of a family operating on autopilot, dismantling their lives without a clear plan. The digital archaeology here reveals not a monster, but a vacuum of purpose. The online investigation community, specifically forums like Web Sleuths and the Unresolved Mysteries subreddit, has spent over a decade trying to fit these puzzle pieces together. The theories range from the plausible to the absurd. Some suggest the family witnessed a crime in the mountains and were silenced. Others believe they were victims of a cult operating in the Bois Mountains. A few have even suggested they staged their own disappearance, only to die by accident due to exposure. The cult theory gained traction due to the finding of a witch's Bible in the house and the graffiti on a storage container the family owned, which contained messages about peace, but also strange, alarming ramblings. However, in the context of rural Oklahoma, cult activity is often a moniker applied to small, isolated groups of drug cookers or anti-government separatists, rather than robe-wearing ritualists. If the Jamisons ran afoul of such a group, we return to the problem of the untouched money and the lack of ballistics evidence. Why has this case remained unsolved? It is not for a lack of clues. It is because there are too many clues, and they all point in different directions. We have the cash criminal motive, the witch letter psychological spiritual motive, the lawsuit with the father familial motive, and the sheer isolation of the location opportunity. The police investigation was also hampered by the environment. The terrain of the Bois Mountains is unforgiving. When the truck was found, a massive search was launched, but the foliage and rock formations hid the bodies for years. By the time the remains were found, the crime scene, if there was a crime scene, had been washed away. There were no tire tracks, no footprints, no DNA under fingernails. We must also acknowledge the role of the failed explanation. Hypothermia is a strong candidate for the cause of death. If the family wandered away from the truck, perhaps chasing the dog, or perhaps in a drug-induced confusion, and got lost, the temperatures on the mountain would have killed them quickly once night fell. Hypothermia causes paradoxical undressing and confusion, which might explain why they were found without heavy winter gear if they had discarded it, though the clothing found was decomposed. But why lay face down, side by side? That positioning implies intent or coercion. Families dying of exposure usually huddle together for warmth, or are found scattered as they search for help. They do not typically lie down in a row. The investigation is a circle. You start with the money, which leads to the drugs, which leads to the lack of evidence, which leads to the mental illness, which leads to the isolation, which leads back to the truck. The digital footprint ends when they drive out of view of their home security camera. The physical footprint ends at the locked truck. Between the truck and the location of the bodies lies 3 miles of silence. Ultimately, the failure to solve the Jamison case lies in the inability to distinguish between the family's internal demons and external threats. Did their paranoia manifest a real danger? Or did they drive into the woods to escape a phantom, only to be killed by the very real harshness of nature? The police files remain open, but inactive. The forums remain active, but circular. The final piece of the investigation is the dog, Macy. The small dog was found alive in the truck 8 days after the family vanished. She was severely malnourished and dehydrated, having eaten her own waste to survive. The fact that the dog was left behind is perhaps the most telling psychological clue. Sherilynn Jamison treated that dog like a child. For her to walk away from the truck and leave Macy locked inside suggests a state of mind where reality had completely fractured, or a situation of immediate, gun-to-the-head coercion where there was no time to act. In the end, the investigation leaves us with a hollow feeling. We have the setting, the characters, and the tragic ending, but the second act, the climax, the event itself, is missing. It is a story with the middle pages ripped out. We are left only with the digital ghosts of a family moving furniture in a trance, and the white noise of the Oklahoma wind moving through the pine trees. Part 4. The aftermath. The mountains do not give up their dead easily, and when they do, they rarely offer explanations. For 4 years, the Sans Bois Mountains held the silence of the Jamison family. From October 2009 until November 2013, The narrative was defined by absence. It was a void filled only by speculation, by search parties dragging grids across the difficult topography, and by the slow, corrosive rust of the abandoned Mazda truck sitting in an impound lot. When the discovery finally came, it did not bring the resolution that the human mind craves. We are pattern-seeking creatures. We desire a beginning, a middle, and an end. We want a cause and an effect. The Jamison case, however, ends in an ellipsis. Two hunters, scouting for deer a mere 3 miles from where the family truck was abandoned, stumbled upon the final resting place of Bobby, Sherilynn, and Madyson. The remains were skeletal, scattered by time and scavengers. The discovery site was not a hidden bunker or a shallow grave dug by human hands. It was simply the forest floor. The medical examiner's report, a document anticipated to be the key that would unlock the mystery, instead became a testament to the erasing power of nature. The cause of death was listed as inconclusive. There was no soft tissue remaining to test for toxins. There was no ballistic trauma to the bones to suggest a shooting. There was no blunt force injury to suggest a fall or a beating. The bones were simply there, stripped of the context of life. This lack of forensic certainty created a vacuum. And in the world of cold cases and internet investigation, a vacuum is always filled by noise. The aftermath of the Jamison case is not defined by what we know, but by the persistent, gnawing questions that refuse to be silenced. The first, and perhaps most pragmatic question, concerns the geography. The distance from the truck to the remains was approximately 3 miles. To a healthy hiker on a marked trail, 3 miles is negligible. But the terrain of the Bois Mountains is not a trail. It is dense, vertical, and unforgiving. Bobby Jamison suffered from chronic back pain, a condition severe enough to warrant medication and limit his mobility. Madyson was 6 years old. The idea that this family, allegedly in a state of paranoia or distress, walked 3 miles into the deep wilderness, uphill and through heavy brush, presents a physiological contradiction. If they were fleeing a threat, adrenaline might account for the distance. If they were wandering in a drug-induced haze, as some theories posit, their coordination would have been compromised. How did they get there? Did they walk to their deaths, or were they carried? Then there is the matter of the brown briefcase. When the remains were discovered, a brown briefcase was found nearby. Unlike the clothes and the bones, which had been subjected to the entropy of the seasons, reports suggest the briefcase was in relatively good condition. Some sources claim it was empty. Others suggest it contained personal papers. But its presence adds a layer of surrealism to the scene. If one is fleeing for their life or wandering into the woods to commit suicide, why bring a briefcase? It is an object of civilization, of business, of order. Its presence on that lonely ridge feels like a glitch in the simulation, an object that does not belong in the final frame of a tragedy. The gun, too, remains a point of contention. Sherilynn owned a .22 caliber pistol. It was not in the truck. It was not found with the remains. While it is possible the weapon was carried off by a scavenger or buried under 4 years of leaf litter, its absence allows for the theory of a third party, a killer who disarmed them, or perhaps a weapon lost in the panic of hypothermia. We must also confront the digital legacy of the case. In the years since the discovery, the Jamison family mystery has migrated from the physical world to the digital archive. It exists now in the liminal spaces of the internet. It lives on forums like web sleuths, in archived Reddit threads, and in the compressed audio of podcast servers. If you search for the location today on satellite imagery, you see only the indifference of the canopy. The road where the truck was found is just a gray scratch in a sea of green. But the digital footprint is vast and chaotic. The internet has obsessed over the so-called final photo of Madyson, found on a phone left in the truck. The image shows the 6-year-old standing with her arms crossed, looking away from the camera. The lighting is harsh. The background is nondescript. To the casual observer, it might look like a pouting child, upset that her parents are arguing. To the online sleuth, however, the image is analyzed with forensic intensity. They look for fear in her posture. They analyze the reflection in her eyes. They claim she looks guarded, or that she is looking at someone standing behind the photographer. This photograph has become a Rorschach test. We project our own anxieties onto the pixelated face of a child who can no longer speak for herself. We want the photo to be a clue, because if it is just a photo of a bored child taken minutes before a tragedy, the randomness of it is too terrifying to accept. The media landscape surrounding the case has also shifted. Initially, the local news reports were factual, concerned with the search and the hope of rescue. As time passed, the tone curdled. The narrative shifted from a missing family to a story of witchcraft, cults, and methamphetamine. The video footage from their home security system, showing Bobby and Sherilynn moving in a trance-like state, loading and unloading their vehicle, has been viewed millions of times. It is titled with words like creepy, possessed, or disturbing. The tragedy of a family likely suffering from a shared delusion or a mental health crisis has been repackaged as ghost story content. This is the corruption of the archive. The human element, the fact that Bobby was a beloved son, that Sherilynn was a mother, that Madyson loved her dog, is eroded by the sensationalism of the mystery. They have become characters in a dark folklore, their names synonymous with the unexplained rather than the lived reality of their struggles. In the aftermath, the site itself, the physical location in Latimer County, Oklahoma, remains quiet. The oil and gas industry still operates in the area. The hunters still climb the ridges in the autumn. The seasons continue to cycle. The location does not remember them. There is a concept in philosophy known as the limit experience. It is the point where the subject is subjected to something so overwhelming that it breaks the boundaries of self. The Jamisons reached their limit experience on that mountain. Whether it was the biting cold of hypothermia, the toxicity of a substance, or the violence of another human being, they crossed a threshold from which there is no return, and from which no signal was sent back. The aftermath leaves us with a profound sense of dissonance. We have the truck, locked and abandoned, with a starving dog inside. We have the $32,000 in cash, untouched under the seat, mocking the motive of robbery. We have the incomprehensible letter from Sherilynn, speaking of death and spirits. And we have the bones, 3 miles away, resting in the dirt. The pieces of the puzzle are all there, but they seem to belong to different puzzles. The money suggests a drug deal or a fresh start. The letter suggests a suicide pact or a breakdown. The distance suggests a chase or a fugue state. None of them fit together cleanly. And perhaps that is the true legacy of the Jamison family disappearance. It forces us to confront the reality that not every story is a circle. Some are jagged lines that simply stop. We live our lives surrounded by systems of safety and surveillance. We carry tracking devices in our pockets. We rely on the grid. We believe that if we vanish, someone will find us. We believe that if we die, science will tell us how. The Jamison case dismantles that security. It reminds us that the wilderness is vast and the human body is fragile. It reminds us that isolation is only a tank of gas and a wrong turn away. As we close the file on this digital excavation, we are left with a final, lingering image, not of the skeletons, nor of the theories. I want you to picture the truck. It is days after they walked away. The sun is setting over the Red Oak Mountains. The air is getting cold. Inside the cab, the family dog, Maisie, is curled on the seat. She is waiting. The silence of the woods is absolute. The doors are locked. The keys are missing. The world moves on, indifferent and vast. And the mystery sits there, rusting in the twilight, waiting for an answer that will never come. This concludes our analysis of the Jamison family. End of record.